Hey everyone, it's John Pollock. It's another edition of Fight News Now. Coming up over the next hour, we'll take a look at the changes to UFC 197 with Daniel Cormier off the card and who will be stepping in to fight Jon Jones on April the 23rd. Plus, we will take a look back at some of the action that went down over the past weekend with World Series of Fighting in Las Vegas and Premier Boxing Champions. So all of that is coming your way. It's Fight News Now, and it's coming up now. I'm here with Robin Black to go through all of the news that's going on today. We're going to get into all the changes with UFC 197. But first off, Robin, you are back. You were calling Shooto Brazil on the weekend. How did things go? People got to watch this on Fight Pass.
Yeah, it was actually really fun. A great card out of Brazil and great fights. And I had a really good time working with Jason Chambers. It was cool. I really enjoyed it.
And the setup, you're not in Brazil. It's in California where they do all of this out of it. How was the experience for you?
Yeah, experience was awesome. That was my first sort of commentary gig related to the UFC. So it was, each step is a dream come true for me. That was super fun. A cool studio in Burbank, California. Fly in, put the headsets on. Really wasn't all that different of a gig than I do with Rammer every week here, so it was comfortable.
You have been doing more and more stuff with the UFC, such as your infamous breakdowns, including the latest one that was going to be Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. So you find out the news, Daniel Cormier is hurt, he is out of the fight, and what is Robin Black's instant reaction?
Oh, man, it's funny. People have accused me of being part of a curse now because I was doing Verdum versus Kane. Fight was off when I was doing the breakdown. I did Connor versus RDA. Fight was off doing the breakdown. And now Jones versus Cormier. That one, I think, is going to come back around, and they're going to have that fight unless OSP can upset him. And that is not out of the realm of possibility. Jones has to be the favorite, but crazier things have happened.
So that was the situation that was laid out. Daniel Cormier has a leg injury that won't require surgery, but it is going to require him to rehab it, and unlikely for UFC 200, and we're probably looking at him to return probably end of the summer, early fall. However, Ovince St. Preux is named the replacement for Daniel Cormier, and an interim title is going to be installed. What did you think of the decision creating an interim title here, and do you have any issues with it, the fact this will be a 5-round fight?
Yeah, I don't really personally myself. The interim title thing, it's used where it makes sense. It's used where there's a big star, a marquee star in there, and that's the truth, and that doesn't bother me in the slightest. But you know me, the title itself is actually not as interesting to me as the fights are, and this fight is very interesting.
I always look at the interim title as the same way that it's essentially the #1 contendership, which no one is going to argue if Jon Jones comes out of this that he is. And if you want to go a step further, many people believe that Jon Jones never lost this title, and it's the only fight to make if Jon Jones wins this. So this situation is going to rectify itself, because if Jones wins this fight, the next fight is Cormier, and then the interim title will be gone.
And if OSP does find a way, hey man, you beat the guy who we all think is really the champion anyway. And yeah, once you put it that way, it really does make a lot of sense. If anything, it moderately undermines Daniel Cormier, who right now can use a little less undermining. He feels probably like he's on the wrong end of the way the audience is viewing him. And now his belt, Jones or OSP will have a belt too.
Ovince St. Preux finds himself in the most high-profile fight of his career. He is a gigantic underdog, and completely, I think, justified by odds makers in being such a heavy underdog. And listen, you look at the past 6 to 8 months of upsets, where would this one be for you, Ovince St. Preux, if you were to upset Jon Jones? A huge if, but there have been many huge ifs that have turned out with the underdog getting their arm raised over the last year.
Yeah, it's true. And super athletic guy, very, very ferocious the way he fights, and very clever and smart. He's actually the kind of guy who finds the way. This is one of these weird ones, because you look at Holly Holm upsetting Ronda Rousey. There was a very projectable way she could do it, and that is fight at distance, keep the woman who needs a grasp on you, and fight your way on the outside. Whereas this one, you almost need a moment. OSP needs to find a moment in the fight. I got a little roll here, too, of a couple of his best moments recently against Cummins and against Shogun. There's one thing in particular to look at in this one. OSP has a lot of very, very good skills, but one of his unique skills is this. Draws you into the space and takes you out. Yes, it's a different punch, but it's the same idea as the way that McGregor took out Aldo. backing up, move back, draw you into the space, and drill you as you start forward. There's an even better example here as he uses a closed door hook, or an open door hook, I'm sorry. He just steps back and slams the door shut right there and slams the lights off of Shogun too. See, draws you forward. Now, this is a superpower of his. It's not a coincidence he took out 2 guys. He's very, very, very good at it, especially for a big, huge light heavyweight. The one issue with that is the reason that works, the reason you get a guy storming forward is when you have a little extra reach on him, you keep him on the outside, and he comes sometimes to travel through the distance, has to leap in a little bit. Jones still has a 4.5-inch reach advantage over him. It's not as big as he's used to, but he's the longer fighter. So you probably won't see Jones storming forward through the space. So that kind of nullifies one of his big tools.
When you compare Ovince St. Preux to Daniel Cormier when it comes to Jon Jones preparing, I mean, sometimes you get last-minute opponents who will be very different styles. I think in most categories, you would see Daniel Cormier having a significant improvement above those of Ovince St. Preux. The biggest difference is the size. Ovince St. Preux is a much larger light heavyweight than Daniel Cormier. Does Jon Jones have to change a whole lot in preparing for Ovince St. Preux?
See the way we see Cormier beating up Anthony Johnson here? Those shots against Johnson, you get on top and beat him up. So when you're Jones and you're defending against Cormier, you're defending against this clinch. You see that somewhere Cormier is very good. Jones is also very good. You're also defending against getting taken down. Not really a case with OSP. Also now, OSP's kind of worst performance or where you got to see a way to beat him was against Glover Teixeira. So Jones will be the guy wanting to wrestle a little bit more in this one, I think. But it's a very different fight. Different sizes, both athletic, but OSP is more the pure athlete. It's an interesting matchup. It really is.
Are you surprised at all Jon Jones was willing to stay on this card? He had every of his past week and all the problems. This guy was in jail. He had a get-out-of-jail-free card, pardon the pun here, for this card that, listen, he's been through a lot over the last week. It would have been within his right to say, listen, Cormier's not ready. I'm going to take this one off, and we'll reschedule the fight for later. It's a much bigger fight with Daniel Cormier than Ovince St. Preux is, but instead he is fighting in 3 weeks.
Yeah, and that gives you a little insight into where he's at. We've seen him say no to a last-minute opponent before. I think it was Chael Sonnen. Was it Chael Sonnen?
Yep.
Yes, it was Chael Sonnen. He said no before, so you know that's something he's more than willing to do if he needs to. It tells me he's in unreal shape. It tells me he's possibly in the best shape. Look what he did to that legend. It tells me he's in the best shape that he's ever been in, or else he says no to this. This is a position you might see him in. See a little more of Jones on top beating you up or on top trying to submit you. I think with a couple of weeks to go, we shift up the game plan, keep him on the outside. When he does rush in, we go to the body lock and we put him down.
And he noted, he put up a video very quickly that he'd be willing to not only take this on short notice, but fight at either light heavyweight or heavyweight. So that gave you just a little glimpse into what he was thinking towards this. And I think he would have been completely justified in not fighting April 23rd. On top of that, I think, let's be honest, no disrespect to Ovince St. Preux, he's not Anthony Johnson and he's not Daniel Cormier. I mean, Jon Jones is going to be heavily favored in this particular fight. And Anthony Johnson's name, everyone was throwing that one out. And I think I would be much more hesitant if Jon Jones was getting ready for Anthony Johnson on such short notice.
The weird one about this is OSP is exactly the kind of guy who can catch you. There's nothing super specific to study, but he's really good at everything. And, you know, obviously if he's going to win this fight, you got to figure it's in the first couple of rounds. Although he'll be, you know, even on only a couple of weeks, he'll be athletic enough to go through the distance if he needs to. But it's exactly the type of guy, a little different, trains at a non-mainstream camp a lot, so he throws things a little different. His timing's a little different. You got to be extra careful. These are the kind of fights that oddly and unpredictably you do get hit coming in. But Jones is really good at keeping you at distance. He still has a reach advantage. That nullifies that moving and drawing game that OSP likes. So OSP now is the guy who has to move forward, and Jones is really good at moving forward even further. So he keeps you at a distance, you try to come in, and he gets in even further. And that'll be the game for Jon Jones. I think that's exactly probably what they're working on right now.
We were looking at a monster number on pay-per-view for this rematch between Jones and Cormier. Certainly now with one half of that gone, you have to kind of measure back expectations. But it is still Jon Jones fighting. It's his first fight since January of last year. Do you feel that this show, are we going to have moderate expectations going in terms of just the business that this card is going to generate?
You know, it's a really weird one. You do not want to be in the press for getting arrested and going to jail, but you're still in the press. People are still talking about you. They're talking about this guy a lot. And no matter what he does, it's very interesting. There was a time where he tried to manage the way that people viewed him, and they were okay with it. Now that he's kind of being himself, people seem really drawn to this guy, good or bad, and that's a powerful thing. I think it'll be a good card, and I think a lot of people will view it.
Also, over the past weekend, World Series of Fighting held their 30th main card, full of decisions. David Branch retaining his middleweight title, holding both championships at 205 and 185. And John Fitch secures the vacant welterweight championship in the shadow, I guess, of Husamar Palhares, who was off at the Polaris event over the weekend, with Jake Shields, who very well could end up being the challenger for John Fitch. That's at least the direction World Series of Fighting would like to go.
That's an interesting fight. You know, that's a logical, cool, interesting fight. Jiu-jitsu heavy fight, and it would be fun to watch. Not Jake Shields, who were just John Fitch. Sorry, I got hit in the head a lot in the last 10 years. John Fitch, I believe, at 170, this is a big moment for him. You know, yeah, he fought George St. Pierre. Yes, he was in the big league at the highest level. But to go and put a belt around his waist, he was talking about his father and stuff. You felt good for John Fitch.
And we look ahead, of course, the UFC back into regular rotation in the month of April. After a few weeks off, they will be in Croatia this Sunday. Very rare Sunday afternoon card. Certainly all of the focus is going to be on the main event involving Junior Dos Santos and Ben Rothwell. As we look towards this fight, I think this is a really interesting fight, an important fight at heavyweight involving two. In Ben Rothwell, somebody that you can certainly say is due a title fight if he gets past the former champion in Junior Dos Santos, and Dos Santos himself very much in need of a win. So this a very relevant fight, I think, coming up Sunday.
Yeah, super relevant fight and a very interesting fight. You know, Dos Santos has the very clean striking, and Big Ben has really odd striking, really hard to predict striking. Squares up, breaks all kinds of rules. It's going to be really neat to see these two heavyweights come together.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how Junior Dos Santos, especially in the opening 2 rounds, I would say, with Ben Rothwell, how he approaches this. I think he's in a much different space. He's coming off that loss to Alistair Overeem, and a win over Ben Rothwell, those losses to me are erased, and suddenly here's a guy that has a win over Stipe Miocic. You add Ben Rothwell to that list, he's right back into that mix.
I agree, and I think he looks at this fight and just fights it as technically proficient as possible. Goes in and fights very smart, but still a striking heavy game. That's theoretically the way you beat these oddball strikers, but also the way you beat a technically sound striker is with oddball tactics. So that's why I'm really into this fight, and it is a very important fight for these guys, and a very important fight for heavyweight.
That wraps it up for us, but be sure to catch 5 rounds each Monday night with Robin Black and John Ramdeen. Though my sources tell me Robin is flying solo this week, it's Monday nights, 8 Eastern, here on Fight Network.